I'm happy to take any questions that you would like to ask, and I'll be happy to defend any of my votes or any of my positions. So, who's got a question?
Hi, my name is Lucas Thors. Do you think mentally ill people should be able to purchase firearms in New Hampshire?
Mentally ill people are, well, depending on how you define mentally ill. I mean, if you say that, for example, somebody determines that they're mentally ill, then I think it has to be adjudicated. In other words, you can't have people saying that somebody's mentally ill and shouldn't be allowed to own a firearm. There has to be something that protects someone who may be falsely accused of being mentally ill. But once they're adjudicated mentally ill, yes, I do. I think they should be barred from buying a firearm. Yes?
Hey, Evans. Are you planning on running for re-election in 2018?
Yes.
And you ran for Speaker of the House
I did.
the previous year. Do you plan on running again for that position?
Well, you have to say that you do, and I haven't decided that I'm not, so I guess I have to say I do. Now, in fairness, I was the Libertarian candidate because I objected to the procedure the Republican Party was going to use. Currently, the way things are set up, if the Republican Party or the Democratic Party takes control of the House, they will determine in their caucus who their nominee is going to be, and everyone in the caucus will be pledged, in effect, to support them. And the problem with that is you have a minority of a minority, well, you have a minority of a majority, perhaps, determining who that speaker is going to be. And I objected to that very much. I thought that the speaker should be determined by the entire 400-member body, Democrats, Libertarians, Republicans, you name it. And so I accepted the Libertarian nomination. For me to have been a viable candidate, in fairness, I'd need to have gone to about a 6th ballot, which didn't happen. Although it could easily have happened. And that would have been very interesting, because being speaker is it's more than a full-time. The job that I'm doing now and the way I approach it makes it a full-time job. But speaker really has a full-time job because he's got a lot to do. And it's also fair to say that the speaker has been described as that position has been described as the most powerful in the state. And there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, because the speaker has a great deal of latitude, particularly in a body of 400. But in addition, we have a very weak governor. The governor has to run every 2 years, which is not something you find in most states. And in addition, we have something called the Executive Council here. And the executive councilors, and there are 5 of them, they're all elected, have control over the governor's appointments. They have to approve them all. And in addition, they have to approve every contract that the governor wishes to enter into in excess, my understanding now is that $20,000. For a long time it was $10,000. So we have a very accessible political system here, which does not have the excesses that a place like, for example, New Jersey, whose governor is the most powerful individual in the state and the most powerful governor in the nation, because he has authority over everything, including, as this knucklehead found out, closing the George Washington Bridge. Kind of stupid, but there you go. Yes?
Caitlin Doherty, are you in support of HB 1542? So the right to carry pistols and revolvers on public campuses.
Yes.
How come?
Pardon me?
How come?
How come?
Yes.
I believe that, first of all, John Lott, who was a sociologist at the University of Chicago at the time he did the study, produced a study that you might take a look at, or you might at least look up the book and read the description in Amazon's description, More Guns, Less Crime. I believe that if you choose to own a firearm, you should be allowed to do so. If you're a young woman, bottom line on this is you have the ability to defend yourself just by reason of the fact that you have a firearm. And I believe that, quite frankly, more firearms make the world a safer place. The problem is that periodically you get a nutcase or somebody who is an organized terrorist. If, for example, a group of terrorists were to determine, and we have a real problem with this, I mean, you look at the World Trade Center, for example. Prior to that, I thought that Muslim terrorists were basically incapable of doing anything other than filling up the trunk of a Toyota with explosives or putting on an explosive belt and killing themselves. Well, I found out different. if, for example, a number of terrorists, let's say 3 or 4 or 5, decided that they could walk into a school, and you look at the Parkland situation down in Florida, and shoot the place up, they could get away with it. In Florida, one of the guards who was assigned to that school, the first shot left the building. Now, some people have tried to excuse that and said, well, that was his training. Okay, maybe so, but that's cockeyed. The heroism that you saw there was exclusively inside the building. Unarmed people fighting Nicholas Cruz, who, by the way, stopped shooting at, I guess, 17 people, laid down his weapon, and was eventually arrested in McDonald's down the road. What should have happened, if you're going to have a situation like that and someone comes in there, he should be concerned about who in that school has a firearm. Maybe that 4-foot 10-inch nurse who weighs 90 pounds, maybe the custodian, maybe the social studies teacher, maybe the assistant principal, but he shouldn't know who has a firearm. Concealed carry should be allowed on campuses and in elementary schools. There should be no gun-free zones. A gun-free zone is an invitation to people who want to come in and do harm. And they know when they get there that no one will be able to oppose them who is capable of doing it. It's very difficult to oppose someone who has a weapon if you don't have one. And it's very easy to oppose them if you do. And if I would have no problem with the idea that I'm here in this class, I am not armed, and it would not bother me in the slightest to find out that 10 of you are. Yes?
I have that comment. So why do you think it is right for like students and teachers to have to enforce the detection of others? Since
Well, what I'm saying is that citizens who choose to carry firearms should do so. I'm not in favor of mandating that teachers or anybody else at a school carry firearms. It's fine with me if there are schools in which nobody carries a firearm, because the person who is thinking about doing harm doesn't know that. If he chooses to go through those front doors and start shooting, if he doesn't know, he doesn't know that you're carrying, he has to worry about that. When he's thinking about where he's going to go, he has to worry about the fact that there may be 10 people in there who are going to shoot at him in the event that he does. We are allowed to carry concealed pistols in the State House. There are 400 of us. If the shooting starts, trust me, the best thing to do is hit the deck, because whoever the shooter is will shortly look like a Swiss cheese, because there's going to be plenty of lead flying in his direction. But you know what? That's fine, because nobody's going to come in there and start shooting, and that's the reason why. Yes?
Adriana, do you know any guns? Do you own any guns?
Yes.
What's the purpose for that? What do you use them for?
Well, for one thing, I'm a bird hunter. I really like bird hunting. Shooting pheasants, shooting ducks, and the like. And when you do that, you need a different type of shotgun for grouse, for example, because you're going to be in heavy cover, and you're going to want a light shotgun, which is relatively small so that you can move it around and take the shot in heavy cover. You're going to want a gun for shooting geese, which is going to be a very different gun. It's going to have a heavy barrel, it's going to have much more, it's going to be a larger gauge, or a smaller gauge. It's, the 12 gauge is larger than the 20 gauge. But my point is, I can easily make the case to have as many guns as a golfer has clubs. No problem at all. Just bird hunting. Now that goes beyond the idea of personal protection. And I'm a strong proponent of people carrying, particularly women, because I think it's entirely appropriate. And if I don't know you're carrying, that's fine. I don't care.
How many guns do you own?
Let's not get into that, but I own a fair number of guns. And I have the right, obviously, to carry them, should I choose to do so, which I generally don't. But anyway, for what that's worth. Yes?
My name's Morgan. Between February 14th and 18th, we as a class conducted a survey on nearly 400 Keene State College students.
Mhm.
About 75% of those students were against a law that would allow pistols and revolvers on public college campuses. If a bill like House Bill 1542 were to be proposed, how would the students' views on this public campus affect your decision?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, they wouldn't. My thinking is that the few people who would carry would be sufficient to ensure that the campus would be a lot safer than it is today. And I mean, for example, right now, I know people carry every day, all the time. I'm not one of them. But had I chosen to bring a pistol in my pocket, what's the difference? Okay, yes,
Hi, Alex Arman. Why don't you carry?
it's too much trouble.
How so?
Well, it's a pain in the neck. I mean, you've got a gun in your pocket. It's kind of reaching. I pull out my cell phone. And don't want to have to reach around my gun to do it. I don't like carrying a pistol, a holster. That's cumbersome. So I just don't. But I have the right to do so. I lived in Gainesville, Florida for a while. That's the home of the University of Florida. And at the time, a number of women, young women, were being raped. There, kind of a rape explosion at the time. And I pulled up to a traffic light and saw two men pulling a woman into a car. I was 100 yards away and I couldn't see any of the details. But I turned, I was driving a little white pickup, Ford Ranger at the time, and I turned, went up on the grass, put the lights on. They're two, much bigger than me. Well, not all that big, so it's not all hard, but much bigger than me, black men pulling a black woman into a car. So I rolled the window down and said, what's going on? And they gave each other a look like, oh God, this is not good. And the reason they did that was because they assumed that I had a pistol. And in Florida, we had concealed carry. And an enormous number of pistols are in the general population in Florida. And they looked at me, and that's clearly what motivated the horrified looks. One of them walked over to the car, put his hands up like this, and said, there's nothing going on here. This is just a domestic dispute, and everything is okay. So I said, is that right? And the woman folded her arms and stuck her nose up in the air, and I said, okay, I'm sorry I bothered you guys. But they thought I was carrying a gun. As it so happens, I wasn't. But the point is that had that been you, you might not have said, you might not have folded your arms and stuck your nose in the air. You might have said, I need all the help I can get, at which time I've done something about it.
So even if people don't carry a gun and that bill were to pass, so to say, that you never get,
Yes.
just the idea of being able to carry a gun would scare some people?
Absolutely. Let's assume that you're walking home late at night and somebody's following you. Well, you may be uncomfortable with that. You might feel a whole lot better if you had a pistol in your purse. And there are plenty of examples of women who have turned to men who've done exactly that. I read about one just the other day. I forget exactly where it was, but obviously it can be duplicated all over the country, where a woman was walking her dog late at night, and she noticed that a man was walking behind her and a van was following him at a slow pace as he kept up with her. And she made a few turns and they followed. She finally turned to him and reached into her purse and pulled out her gun and said, I don't have to hurt you. And that was the end of that. And you should have the right to do that. Yes?
I'm Haley Patch, and do you think students have valid safety concerns with the bill potentially being passed?
How do you mean valid safety concerns?
Like, do you think they have a valid reason to feel unsafe on campus?
No.
Why?
Because if you walk down the street in Keene, New Hampshire, a great many people you're walking past are already carrying firearms. And if you don't, I mean, we have the right to carry exposed, so I can carry openly and have a 45 on my hip, as could any of you, although obviously not on campus. That shouldn't cause any harm. In fact, it should make you feel safer, because if some nutcase does come down the road shooting, somebody can do something other than throw a donut at them. And that's useful. Okay, let's see who hasn't asked me more. Yes?
To kind of switch gears, in 2017, given the opioid and heroin crisis in New Hampshire, why did you vote against additional drug enforcement funding?
I forget exactly which bill you're talking about. Some of them get kind of complicated because there are any number of reasons why, but I'll tell you my general theory on the opioid crisis and funding it, and funding the solution to it, hopefully. Number one, I voted for most all of the opioid bills. I'm kind of surprised you found one that I hadn't. But in any event, I think if you check, you'll see that I voted for most of them. I'm more than happy to spend money on something if we have a reason to think that it's going to work. But at a certain point, you have to say, okay, we put $1 million into this. What's the recidivism rate? I mean, are we fixing it so that 20% of the people who had a problem are drug-free for a year or 6 months? Or are we spending a ton of money and you want to spend more, not you, but someone wants to spend even more to not get any results? I mean, if we have a problem where we put money into something in the way of a drug prevention program that doesn't work, then I don't want to spend that money on that anymore. I am more than willing to try something new that may work, but I'm not willing to support something that hasn't. So I don't know if that really answers your question, and I don't really remember exactly what the terms of that bill were. There could be a number of reasons why I opposed, but I think you'll find I supported most of them. And I'm going to continue to do so until it's demonstrated that they don't work, at which time I'm not going to fund. Because at that point, we should be finding something that does work and put money into that. I don't want to throw good money after bad. So I think that answers your question. I hope it does.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, my name is Meredith King. Do you think the lenient gun laws in New Hampshire would put the public at more risk for someone like Nicholas Cruz to obtain a gun? And if so, do you think that reform should happen before something like House Bill 1542 passes?
I think that the reform that we should be looking at is an end to gun-free zones. Those are an invitation to people like Cruz who want to do harm. That's the only change that I'd be much interested in. Beyond that, as I've mentioned, I think more guns, the better. You as a woman, if you feel threatened, you should have the right to go buy a gun if that's what you determine will make you safer.
Do you believe that some statistics support the fact that when women carry guns, they're more likely to have the weapon used against them in a violent attack? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you buy a gun, you should be prepared to use it.
So do you think that training should be initiated on purchase of a gun?
I think you should understand that if you need training, you get it on your own. But I think you also have to realize that, for example, with a revolver, there's no safety on a revolver. Take it out, you pull the trigger, and there it goes. Now, some of them require that you cock the barrel of the hammer. Others just pull the trigger, and there it goes. There's not a whole lot of training involved in that. And if I'm 3 feet in front of you and threatening you, just taking it out is bound to impress me. I shouldn't say me, but bound to impress any man. It doesn't matter if he's 6 foot tall or 8 feet tall. He's going to look at that gun and say, "Oh, the wrong hand this thing," and that'll make a difference. You should have that ability, and that ability to protect yourself. In New Jersey, I guess about a year ago, this is all over the internet, a woman sought to buy a gun because she was concerned about her ex-boyfriend, who she felt was threatening her. And she had to wait, I think it was 3 days in New Jersey, and there were all kinds of restrictions on getting the gun. The day she was going to be able to pick up her gun, he killed her. And you have to recognize that protective order is a piece of paper. And you may find that somebody sees you and says, "Man, she's the girl of my dreams. My life won't be complete unless I spend it with her." And every time you walk out of your class, there this clown is. You made it clear you don't want anything to do with him, but there he is. So you go to the police and say, "Well, what about this? I mean, can you do anything about this?" Say, "Yeah, we're familiar with the guy. He's been in jail a couple of times, so you should be careful with him. But there's nothing we can do until he actually does something." What if they say that? What are you going to do? Buy a Doberman Pinscher? Okay, that's an option. But another option, which you should have, is that you could buy a pistol and put it in your purse.
Doesn't he have the option to also buy a gun and use it against myself?
Of course he does. But your being disarmed isn't going to improve your odds on that score. My point is that you should have the right to do that. Yes? I
Going
don't
off
think
of-
I've got anybody else here that I haven't talked to.
Going
Okay.
off of that, so you don't think there should be a more tedious process in order to obtain a gun?
No, I don't. Yes?
House Bill 1542 about carrying a concealed pistol on campus was an expedient to legislate.
That's right.
Why do you think that was?
Why do I think it was?
Yeah.
Well, I think it was partly the Parkland issue, partly the fact that the proponent of that gun is fairly controversial. The sponsor of the bill is a fairly controversial character, and the fact that he wasn't there that day to speak on behalf of this bill. But I'm not, even if he had been, and even had someone else been the proponent of that bill, I'm not sure it would have passed. But I don't know that it wouldn't have been a closer margin.
Do you think it would have made a difference if Brian Stone wasn't the sponsor for the bill?
I think so. Well,
Thank you.
wait a second. Did you have one?
Yeah, that was actually my first follow-up question was my question, but
Okay.
I'll do another one. My
I'm
name's
just trying to
Grace.
make sure everybody who's
Yeah.
got a chance to take a crack at me gets their chance before I go to seconds. Yes?
Just one quick, could you move the mic in front of you?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. No,
I
it's fine.
apologize.
No, you're fine.
My voice normally carries wherever the mic is,
Yeah.
but
So just to switch gears a little bit, what was your opinion on the recent proposed bill that will restrict out-of-state college students from voting in New Hampshire?
I'm anxious to have everybody who is legally, everybody who has a commitment to the state of New Hampshire should be allowed to vote. However, we do have cases where there are students who vote in Connecticut, not to pick on Connecticut or New Jersey, vote there, absentee, and then vote here as well. And I have a problem with that. I mean, if you're going to vote here, that's fine, but I don't want you voting anywhere else. Make a commitment to New Hampshire. Don't vote in New Jersey and then come up here and vote here as well. I have a problem on that score, period. And we should be enforcing that law. As far as I'm concerned, anybody here who wants to vote, I'm for it. I'll be happy to help you get your registration taken care of and make sure you can vote, but I don't want you voting anywhere else, and I want to prosecute anybody who is. And we have some cases where we have that problem. Yes?
Just to follow up to that, do you have a statistic on that, to how many people double vote?
I haven't got one with me, but there's a fellow named Ed Nail at Concerned New Hampshire Taxpayers who is always spouting statistics, and if you're really interested, I will be happy to get a hold of him and have him send me whatever it is that he's got, and I'll send it to you. By the way, I should also give you my contact information. I apologize for not doing that. The last meeting I attended, they took all my cards. Sorry, all the ones I brought with me anyway. My name is Jim McConnell. That's M small c capital C O-N-N-E-L-L. My telephone number is 903-3878. Obviously, that's area code 603. My email address, easiest email address to use, is my personal email address. That's MCC, Mike Charlie Charlie, at Mindspring, MINDSPRING.com. Okay? And I'm happy to hear from you at any point. So if you want me to send me an email and ask me to get that information, and I will see if I can come up with it, because I'd be happy to do that. But the Secretary of State has a lot of this too. And if I can't get it from Ed, I can ask the Secretary of State to give me some sort of records, and I think we can probably do that as well. But I'm sure I can come up with something for you. Okay, we're back to seconds. Go to it.
Are you for or against extended capacity magazines? Just regulations or sanctions on that?
I never really thought about it, but there's a limit to what... No, I'm not. First of all, until you get to the point where it's an automatic weapon, it doesn't really matter, because it's bang, 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 bang. In Vietnam, I used a real assault weapon. I had what they called a CAR-15, which was a cut-down AR-15, had a collapsible stock and a short barrel. And that was fully automatic. But fully automatic doesn't do much for me.
So are you for or against the owning and purchase of fully automatic weapons?
Fully automatic weapons have been barred for a long time.
What about the mechanisms that allow people to...
Bump stocks. Yeah, I haven't really thought about bump stocks all that much. I don't really have a problem with them, but by the same token, should they be barred, I wouldn't, it's not an issue that I'm prepared to go to the mat on. But as a general rule, I don't favor any restrictions. On the theory that if you're carrying a gun and you own a weapon, that makes me safer. And with few exceptions, that's the case. By the way, with respect to lethality and killing people, you might want to take a look at the Murrah building that Timothy McVeigh blew up. Now that was devastating. I mean, he rented a truck, filled it up with fertilizer and ammonia, I guess it was. I don't know, I escaped from high school chemistry, so don't hold me to this. But in any event, and he parked it out in front of the building. And then he detonated it, and about, I don't know what percentage of the building went down, but oh, brother. And if somebody were to take something like that and drive it into a school or a Walmart or something, it would be devastating. So it isn't just guns. I mean, it's any number of things that can be quite dangerous. Yes?
What's your opinion on multiple companies no longer being affiliated with the NRA?
Oh, I think they're making a mistake. Approximately something like 25 to 30% of the country is strongly supportive of the National Rifle Association. The National Rifle Association in the press is perceived as making big contributions to candidates. That's not what motivates the candidates to support the NRA's positions if they don't honestly believe in pro-Second Amendment position. What motivates them is that there are millions of Americans who support their positions. So when you say, well, the NRA is an evil organization, you're talking about a big chunk of the country and very active supporters. When I graduated from college, my first paycheck, in part, went to a life membership in the National Rifle Association. I'm currently a benefactor member of the National Rifle Association. Now, that's the highest level of life member. So I take this stuff very seriously. And I can also tell you that I owned my first shotgun when I was 10 years old. As I say, I like to bird hunt. And I can also tell you that when I was in Vietnam, I thought I was doing something very brave, volunteering for the paratroops. But it turns out that the area that I was in was the safest place in the country. Because when we would show up, 173rd Airborne Brigade, the first Army unit in Vietnam and the only real paratroop unit there, in the way of regular formations. I mean, obviously you had special forces units too, but we could go places where nobody else could, simply because they wouldn't tangle with us. And as a result, you know, there were times when it would have been very easy for somebody to try to take me on, but my facility with firearms is evident. And I was shot at, but never close enough for anybody but a heck of a good shot to hit me, and nobody ever did. In that regard, I only saw the face of one man I had a hand in killing, and I only had a piece of him, so. Yes?
So getting back to the survey that we did,
Yes.
We interviewed close to 400 students here,
Mm-hmm.
and a majority of them said that they would feel less safe if pistols and revolvers were allowed on campus. And I know that in the beginning you said that a majority of them not supporting the bill wouldn't change your mind, but
It wouldn't.
if
That's right.
students genuinely feel less safe, like how does that not change your opinion at all on the bill?
No. Because the problem is that gun-free zones make you less safe, not more safe.
Why?
Because any nutcase can come in here and shoot the place up, knowing that the best he will see in the way of an opponent is what you saw in Parkland, Florida. Unarmed people, men, trying to take that gun away from him. That's a tall order. It's much easier for me if I'm trying to take a gun away from someone. If I have my own gun and I can shoot him, that makes it a whole lot easier.
So follow up, would if an active shooter comes on campus and say how many 5,000 students, Acme State, about 5,000,
3,600 now, I'm afraid.
And there are 100 students on campus with guns.
Mhm.
Do you think that would be more safe than, like,
More safe. Well, what if you're
So,
one of them? How
100
dangerous are you
100
going to be if you own a gun?
100 kids pull out their guns and then start, and they don't know which shooter? It could be a student, so they don't know who's shooting, and then
It's pretty easy to tell, I think. If somebody is shooting at you, I'm going to know there's a problem, and I'm going to know he's the problem.
thank you.
It's okay. But seriously, if you were carrying a gun right now, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest. That's fine. You're protected. We're all protected because of the fact that you have a firearm. Okay, yes.
So.
I'm sorry. You're next. Well, you'll be next after him. Go ahead.
So if teachers and students were able to carry.
I'm sorry?
If teachers and students were able to carry pistols on campus and an active shooter did come on campus, what would you say would be the best thing for them to do?
The people who have firearms,
The people who have firearms.
engage the shooter.
So go after the shooter.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go running up to him if he's shooting people with your gun. But when he stops to reload, when he turns to shoot the other way, those give you opportunities to take off your shoes, run at him, close the distance, and shoot him.
Do you think anybody could do that?
Probably not, but enough people could do it. You remember, it only takes a couple, but the important part is that he has to think about the fact that if I go to Keene State and start shooting the place up, how many students have guns? How many of the custodians here have guns? How many, if there's a plumber here fixing a leaky pipe, he may have a gun. You may have a gun. That changes the equation quite a bit. Right now, somebody like Nicholas Cruz can go in there, and even if they have a security guard, if he knows where that security guard is, he can theoretically shoot him first, and then he has free range. The only thing that stopped him from killing a lot more than 17 people is he chose to put his gun down. And that's because nobody in that building was able to take him on and stop him. And it's very difficult to stop him with your hands when he has a firearm. But it's very easy to stop him if you have a firearm too. Okay, you're next.
So you mentioned your support on carrying firearms.
Yes.
One concern of many is the combination of alcohol and firearms, drinking at bars or any sort of public area where there's alcohol involved.
Right.
Do you feel there should be any sort of specific regulation for those areas?
I don't know what we have in the way of state law on that right now, to be perfectly honest with you. And I don't drink, so it's not really something I spend a lot of time thinking about. I will say that if someone behaves recklessly with his firearm, if he brandishes his firearm and threatens you or something like that, he can wind up in jail right now. And that's for sure. And that's as it should be.
And a quick follow-up to that, just one thing, for lack of a better word, I'm confused on. You mentioned that if you have a firearm, you can protect those around, but you've also mentioned that you don't carry. Other than it being a hassle, any other reason that you don't carry yourself?
No.
None.
If I felt that there was if, for example, let's say we had an epidemic of rapes in this area, then I'd carry. Because if I came upon a rapist, our laws allow me to shoot him. And he'd get a millisecond when I tell him to stop, between my telling him to stop and my stopping him. And that's a whole lot easier to do if you have a firearm than if you don't. Yes?
Switching gears a little bit, could you explain House Bill 1375? That was the one that wanted to take away the prohibition on inhaling toxic chemicals and vapors for effect.
Yeah, I was asked about that. That's a frivolous law. That's like saying we have a law against adultery, which we used to have, which we repealed, by the way. The reason that I supported that is because a prison guard is also a state representative. He came to me because I have the reputation of being willing to consider anything, which I do. And I'm the only Republican on a lot of Democratic bills, it so happens. But in any event, he came to me and said, I'd like to consider some of my bills. So I looked at it and said, well, you're going to have to explain these bills. He also had another one that I did support, which was not controversial at all. I forget exactly what happened to that. But in any event, I turned him down on a number of them. But I concluded, after listening to him, that that provision, the reason that you don't, it was in fact frivolous. That law was in fact frivolous. Because the reason you shouldn't do that is not because it's illegal, because it's stupid. Okay? I mean, right now, for example, we have an epidemic among, I guess, 13 and 14-year-olds of kids who are taking these Tide Pods. Okay? This is laundry detergent or dishwasher detergent, and they eat it. Okay, I can pass a bill against that. Do you really think it's going to stop somebody who's dumb enough to do that? Right. So we can clog up the books with all kinds of crazy laws, which means that if at some point you get arrested for something and somebody says, oh, he's got an open tube of glue in the car for whatever reason, okay, let's slap him with that too. I don't think that's right.
But just to follow up with that, so
Yes.
that law, that bill would have made huffing things like glue or gasoline legal for people.
It would have fixed it so it was no longer illegal. It'd still be stupid. Okay? I mean, we don't have a law that says that you can't, run around naked on the roof of these buildings. But I don't think it's very smart. I mean, particularly in the winter when it's icy. Bad idea. The point is, you're not going to do that because it's stupid. And I can't help you if you are stupid and you want to do dumb stuff like that, but having a law on the books, having frivolous laws on the books is not good. We should reduce the number of laws on the books so that the ones that are there mean something. And I just thought that was reasonable. So I said, okay, I'll go along with you on this one. And basically my attitude was, we'll run up the flagpole and see who salutes. Well, as it turns out, nobody saluted, so, okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Yes?
I do have a question, yes. So, I don't have the exact statistic, and forgive me for that, but
Sure.
a lot of statistics have shown that when cops go to fire, a couple, only a few in 10 actually hit the target.
Yeah, they miss a lot. You're
So,
right.
Are you worried, even though those are trained individuals, are you worried if a gunman comes on campus and students with pistols and revolvers open fire that they'll hit another student and kill another student accidentally?
Sure, I'm worried about that. But the likelihood that you would do that and miss, while possible, is a whole lot less deleterious than the effect of your shooting at the gunman who is killing people as we speak. So my approach to that is, okay, you shot at him and you missed, but he heard that bullet whizzing by, and it made an impression on him. And it may, simply by reason of the fact that you did shoot, cause him to stop, and maybe somebody else is going to be alive. And there's always the possibility, hopefully the result, that you will in fact hit him. But if enough people shoot at him, then the odds are pretty good that someone is going to get him. And the other thing about it is, when someone is doing something like this, in my mind, I don't think they're in the middle of a bunch of students. When they start shooting, the students get out of the way. So he's more likely going to be in a position where he's going to be relatively isolated. Okay. Oh boy. Yes?
What kind of support did House Bill 1542 involving the carrying on campus have with Republicans in the New Hampshire House?
I don't know, but you could check the tally by going online, and you could see the roll call vote. I would imagine that the support was mostly Republican because Republicans tend to be more supportive of gun rights than Democrats. It's become an issue which pretty clearly divides the parties. And while there are some Democrats who are supportive of gun rights, there are far more Republicans who are supportive of gun rights. And it becomes a function of the primary process. If you're running for office in the Democratic Party and you say you strongly support the NRA's position, that's probably not a vote getter for you. Whereas in the Republican Party, that's pretty well assumed. If you're not, then a lot of us would like to talk to you a little further to understand exactly where you stand. Okay. All right, who's next? Okay, start with you.
If pistols and revolvers were allowed on public college campuses, what protocols would you like to see colleges implement? Such as allowing campus safety officers to carry guns, should the guns be locked up?
Well, first of all, I think that with respect to, I want to end gun-free zones. And to that end, it seems to me that college campuses and schools should be no different than Walmart or a gas station or the well, I was going to say the post office, but they don't have guns either, or the town hall. If you choose to carry in any of those places, walking down Main Street, you should be able to come to your car on campus with your pistol in your purse, and that should be legal. So, as far as I'm concerned, it sort of self-selects. Those of you who choose to carry should be allowed to do so, and those of you who do not choose to carry shouldn't have to. And I feel that way about teachers, for example, at Parkland. And a lot of teachers' unions and teachers' spokesmen have indicated, well, we don't want to carry guns. Okay, don't carry a gun. Just the thought that you might is sufficient to change the equation. Yes?
Hi, Alyssa Branco. Do you think there should be additional training necessary for people to carry firearms on campus?
No.
No. Why not?
Because it is something that you have to decide. You may decide that you never want to use your gun except close up. And, well, let me go back. First of all, it's simplicity itself. The only issue is with a semi-automatic pistol that you have to understand how you cock the pistol and how you flip off the safety. But with a revolver, you just take it out. Now, obviously, I think it's smart for anybody who buys a firearm to practice a little bit with that firearm. And in addition, you may find that the firearm you purchased isn't really right for you. You don't really like it. It kicks too much for your taste or whatever, or you can't hit anything with it. I mean, some people will find that they are deadly with a certain type of weapon, but worthless with another. And you should certainly explore that. But my telling you that this is what you have to do, I think is way out of line. You want to buy a revolver? How about it? Okay, who's next?
Meredith again. So to me, it seems as your argument is that more guns will prevent or scare away, in essence, like school or mass shooters from entering certain jurisdictions or properties.
Gun-free zones prove a magnet for people.
Would you say that it's reasonable to argue that school shooters like Nicholas Cruz or the Columbine shooters, that they might not be in the right state of mind to fear that, and in fact, like the Columbine shooters, they plan to end their destruction in killing themselves. So do you think that could still not even stop those people in that state of mind?
I can't guarantee it'll stop all of them, but I can tell you that right now, if a shooter were to show up at an elementary school, what's going to stop him? And I think that's wrong. I mean, if the assistant principal, the custodian, the school nurse, the librarian are carrying pistols, all of those students are safer. Because you may be right. Maybe this guy's just so out of it, he doesn't know where he's going. And as far as he's concerned, he can walk right into the police station and start shooting. Fair enough, I understand. I mean, there are people who've actually walked into gun shops and tried to hold them up with a knife. Think about that one. That's Darwin Award winner there. But the fact is that it happens. So, yes, you're absolutely right. You can't forecast what people will do, but the odds are with my argument, I think. Yes?
So if people can carry on college campuses, if the bill passes, or if it passes in the future.
The future bill passes, yeah.
Should campus safety specifically, not like relating to teachers or anything, should they be required to carry?
Well, I think that's up to the campus. I mean, if you decide, if Keene State decides that's what they want to do, fine. I don't have any problem with that. But by the same token, that's not my principal interest. My principal interest is in ensuring that when someone comes on campus or into a school, into any what are now gun-free zones, and determines they want to do harm, that they have to be worried about what they're doing. Right now, someone like Nicholas Cruz had total control of the situation. He had the firearm and he knew nobody else did. He could, I mean, if he had chosen not to lay that firearm down and try to escape with the students, he could have killed twice as many as he did, or more than that. He should have had to worry about the fact that you might have come out of your office carrying a gun and threatening him. Actually kill him. But right now, he doesn't have that. He doesn't have to face that risk. And to my way of thinking, any school that has people on staff, whether they're teachers, librarian, custodian, doesn't matter, whoever it is, if they're carrying concealed, that reduces the likelihood that that shooter will be able to do the damage he plans to do. Yes, he'll kill a few people. That's entirely likely. But it'll be a few people. As I said earlier, if, for example, a bunch of terrorists were to come onto a campus like Parkland, 3 or 4 of them could have done an enormous amount of damage. The students all hunkered down, they hid in closets. I mean, some of them escaped and got out of the building, but they could have presumably walked class to class and shot them all without fear of anybody stopping. Well, that's not right. That's my thinking. Yes?
Do you believe that there should be more security in schools, like metal detectors?
Well, there's a limit to what you can do. And the other thing is, okay, let's say you had metal detectors. Let's say you had all those things. Fine. So these guys decide that they're going to be creative, and they figure out when the trash collection comes into the school, or when the food service gets their deliveries, or that they could grab a UPS truck and show up. And all those things would be sort of like, okay, that happens every day. The food service guys come in every day, and no problem. But this time, it's not the food service guys. It's 5 terrorists, and they come run out the back of that thing, barge through the kitchen, and start shooting the place up. There are plenty of ways to get around that. And I just think that at a certain point, you know, we live in a free society, and part of the reason we live in a free society is because we're an armed society. And if you go around the world and experience a few other cultures, you'll find out there's a lot to that.
Thank you.
Yes?
If there was a more tedious process, do you think Nicholas Cruz would have done what he did?
Probably. You know, there's a black market in a lot of things, including firearms. And if somebody really wants to get one, they can. I mean, stolen guns, you know, a policeman get knocked over the head and somebody takes his gun. He's got a gun.
Do you think if we did have a more tedious process, there would be less school shooting?
No. Yes?
Following the more guns equals safer
More guns,
zones-
less crime.
More guns, less crime.
Right.
Since Australia obviously doesn't follow that line of thinking, what do you think they owe their success in not having like a major mass shootings since 1996?
But they've had some.
They've had some, but much less than the U.S.
Well, I can't really, you know, get into that. I don't know. Britain has very restrictive laws as well, but they still had problems too. And it's different in a lot of ways in a lot of different countries and a lot of different cultures. I also, frankly, I was listening to a program coming in about the difficulty that some young men have because in growing up. And I think that, while I don't really agree with any of that, I do think that the culture has changed a great deal since when I was a kid. I could have taken my shotgun to school if I was going to go bird hunting afterwards, and nobody would have batted an eye. And we had rifle teams in school too. Just regular course of business, no big deal. And that's changed. And I think that there are any number of things that have changed it, but one thing that's made it more dangerous is gun-free zones. They're a magnet for guys who want to do this stuff. Yes?
You said you use guns for bird hunting.
Bird
Do
hunt.
you have one
My principal interest,
for
yes.
your safety?
Pardon me?
Do you carry a gun for protection?
I've never felt the need or never been interested in doing that. But if, as I mentioned, if all of a sudden we had a series of rapes here in Keene, yeah, I'd carry it. The law in New Hampshire allows, and as a matter of fact, I'll tell you about a bill I put in. The laws in New Hampshire allow one to use lethal force in the event of a kidnapping or sexual assault. So, if I am carrying a pistol and I come upon someone who is raping a woman or attempting to kidnap her, I can put a stop to that using lethal force. And in fact, in Europe, where they don't have firearms to the same degree that we have them here, they're finding that some of the Muslim immigrants are surrounding a woman so that no one can get in there to prevent a rape, and then one of them goes in and rapes the woman that's surrounded. That can't happen around here because our laws do allow us to prevent that. And I have put in a bill this year that would have made explicit the right to use lethal force in that case. And but that failed, by the way. But I'm certain it's going to be back. But the fact is that the purpose of putting the bill in was to ensure that in the event that someone shot a couple of those people and the rapist, that nobody would be able to say anything like, well, as they've said in Europe, some judges have said, well, you know, it's part of his culture, and we have to respect that. I've got a problem. I've got a culture too, and it doesn't include women being raped. Yes?
So if we're allowed to carry on college campuses, for a campus like Keene State, should there be different regulations in on-campus dorms than on campus itself?
No, I think so. No. I mean, if you live on campus and you feel the need to own a firearm, a pistol, to protect yourself, how would that work? I mean, if you live on campus, you've got this pistol in your purse, you show up at your dorm, where do we go from there? To my way of thinking, and further, if you are at risk, you're just as much at risk in your dorm room as you are walking across campus, aren't you? I would think so. But the point is, it's not my choice. That's your choice. It's up to you. And you should have that. Yes?
Do you think that more extensive or intensive screenings and background checks, mental screenings and background checks, would help prevent school shootings in the case of, like, say, Nicholas Cruz or Dylan Roof?
Not really. No. And the other problem is that if you make guns, the more difficult you make guns to get, the less you allow people who suddenly need them to get them. As I say, I mean, if you suddenly felt that you were at risk of being raped, I'd want you to be able to get a gun to protect yourself. Period. I don't want to hear it. Period. So, I mean, unless you are, unless you have a history of violence, of shooting a place up, then obviously it may be a different story. But the point is that you should have the right to protect yourself. Yes?
Well, in that line of thinking, that also makes it easier if I suddenly decide that I want to go shoot up a school, I can instantly get a gun as well. Like, it works both ways, so where does that balance fall?
I suppose it does work both ways, but the fact is that the number of people who choose to shoot up a school is a whole lot smaller than the number of, in this case, women who seek to protect themselves. And the other thing is that, okay, some nutcase decides he wants to shoot up a school. You are the assistant principal, the teacher, the librarian, whatever at that school, and you're carrying a pistol. That's made that school a lot safer. Because when he comes barging through the door and starts shooting, somebody can do something about it. And even if nobody in that school is carrying a pistol or has a pistol, he has to think about that. And that means that maybe he finds some other place to take out his rage or whatever he's got going. Yes?
Don't you feel like it'll be a little bit more chaotic if the school, say someone came into Queen State and started shooting, then everyone had their guns out and didn't know who the shooter was, so everyone just started shooting? Don't you think there'd be more deaths then?
Well, I think I'm hard pressed to imagine that if that were to happen and you carried a pistol, you would just start shooting indiscriminately. I mean, you'd see that the shooter
What if you,
was
if you
shooting
can't
people.
see, if you hear the gunshots and you don't see it, and you're just like in that state of mind, like, oh my God, you have a gun, you're gonna start shooting.
You're not going to start shooting until you have a target.
How do you know that? How do you know
Well, it's
that?
pretty easy to see. If somebody walks in and starts shooting, somebody shoots you, and so on and so forth, it's pretty easy to see that's the problem. Not the guy over here who's shooting at the guy who's doing the shooting at you.
Okay.
I mean, it's really not that, it's not that hard for me to, it's very hard for me to imagine circumstances where you heard a gunshot and you start shooting in all directions. That's just not going to happen. Yes?
So it's kind of no secret that colleges like around the U.S. like alcohol is very prominent in legal drinking and underage drinking. Say if there was if someone was at a party and someone was carrying and was intoxicated, and they potentially used their gun. Like, do you think this would be like one of the issues with having guns on campus?
Yeah, well, we have laws in this state that deal with some of these things. I mean, you can't, if you're carrying a pistol, you can't suddenly pull it out and say, I'm the toughest guy in the room, and anybody who wants to pick a fight with me is going to get shot right here, right then and there. That's not something you can do. And if you do, then there are problems with that which can be prosecuted. I mean, there are any number of things that will fix it so that if you don't act responsibly with a firearm, that you will lose that right. Yes?
You've been using the word nutcase, so can you just define that in your own terms?
Well, a guy like, yeah, I guess I can, although it's a good point. Someone who is mentally unhinged, who thinks that the world is against him or doesn't treat him with proper respect or whatever it is that he thinks he's got a problem with. Anybody who, it seems to me, wants to go killing people as a result of that is unhinged. So I think that would kind of define it, although probably pretty crudely. But
Would you define that different than being mentally unstable or mentally ill?
no, that's pretty much the same.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, well, I guess there's a difference there. But my thinking on the mentally ill, in some countries they would say, you oppose the government, ergo you are mentally ill. And they would send you to psychiatric care and lock you up. We shouldn't be allowed to do that here. A judge should have to determine that you are mentally ill, and that would bar you from owning a firearm. Now, you can't stop somebody like Nicholas Cruz. Well, actually, in that case, we certainly should have, because the FBI knew what he was supposed to be doing. They were told that. The local sheriffs, people visited him any number of times. I mean, in that particular case, I would like to have thought they could have done more than they did. But the FBI has a history of this. Prior to 9/11, a woman named Kathleen Rowley, who was a special agent in Minneapolis, reported to her headquarters that, or reported to her senior leadership, that we have a problem in that there are a number of Muslim men here who are learning to fly aircraft, but all they want to do is learn to take off and fly. They don't want to learn to land. That's kind of unusual, but nobody did anything.
So do you think nutcases in your terms can be treated?
Depends on what their problem is. Yes, in some cases they certainly can. You bet. Okay.
So you've mentioned that you want to do away with gun-free zones.
Yes.
That's obviously a complex issue. There's two sides to
I'm sorry?
My one question, that's a complex issue that's two sides to it, obviously. My one question is, besides that, what do you think is the number one thing that we as a country need to do to prevent these from happening again?
I'd like to see greater training in firearms familiarity. I would like people to know when someone is changing his empty magazine out for a full magazine, I'd like people to realize what he's doing, because that presents them with an opportunity, even if they're unarmed, to deal with him. And a lot of people have no idea what, they have no more idea of what someone is doing with a firearm than they do with somebody who's flying a helicopter. Haven't got a clue.
We have time for one more question.
Well, ladies, okay.
I have a hand up. So, to clarify, earlier you said you didn't want gun training to be mandatory, but just now you said that you wanted more people to have gun training.
I don't want you to feel that you have to have training before you buy a firearm and before you carry a firearm. But I do like the idea of more people being familiar with firearms so they understand what they're dealing with. When I was young, all of the men, almost all of the men in our area would show up on Memorial Day for the Memorial Day parade. I mean, the whole town showed up because all of these guys had been in the Second World War in Korea. And all of them were familiar with firearms. We didn't have these problems then. I'd also say that, quite frankly, I'm a big proponent of the draft. Because I think that if we did have a draft, first of all, people would know a lot more about a lot of these things. And in addition, we wouldn't be in some of the places that we are. I'm one of the people who opposed our going to the Middle East. In the manner that we did, I think it's completely idiotic. And we haven't done anything there in 17 years. Well, not 17 years. 16 years, or thereabouts, 17 maybe. That hasn't been counterproductive. We haven't done anything over there that's made any sense at all. It's all been damaging. We've lost lives, wounded, tons of money, national prestige, you name it. We've done everything wrong. And I believe if we had a draft and everybody was subject to going, that we'd be far more careful about where we go and what we do. And I think we need that very bad.
Actually, I have a quick follow-up on that.
Yes.
Do you support a draft for young men and young women?
No.
Why?
Because in the non-technical services, the Army and the Marine Corps, no offense, ladies, but there are only so many places we can use you. Now, if you're going in the Air Force or the Navy, that's great, because if you're sitting at a computer console, you can do that as well as I can, and then some. Probably better. But when you're out in the bush, the weather's miserable. There are snakes all over the place, leeches all over you. It's filthy. It stinks. It's just god-awful. And it's hard enough for the men to deal with. And quite frankly, when you're out there, the men are all going to be worried about you. And it's really going to gum things up. And I have a little bit of experience with that. But the fact is that it just doesn't work all that well. So there are plenty of places women can go and serve. And I'd encourage them to do so if they choose to. But the fact is that there are only so many places, no offense, ladies, I love you. There are only so many places we can use you when it comes to the non-technical services.
Thank you very much. And from what you said, if they have any follow-up questions, they can
Absolutely.
email you or do